20 U.S. states raised the minimum wage in the new year. New Jersey, among them, hiking hourly pay by $1 to $12 an hour. But business groups argue this is not the right time to do it, largely as small and medium-sized businesses that have been affected by COVID-related closures struggle to stay afloat. Let's bring in Tom Bracken. He is the president and CEO of the New Jersey Chamber of Commerce. And Tom, I know you initially called for, I think what you described as an economic off-ramp, a pause button, if you will, that businesses can turn to in times of economic crisis, which some would argue we're actually in right now. What's the big concern with the dollar an hour increase right now, the extra dollar increase, as you look to see how businesses adjust to the new reality?
Well, it's pretty obvious that we're going through, with this pandemic, the worst economic times in the history of our state. And companies are struggling dramatically to survive. And most of the companies who probably have minimum wage workers are some of the smaller companies who have had significant difficulties financially. And quite frankly, many of them are waiting for the second round of PPP loans to get the liquidity to survive. Their costs have been cut. They have reduced all expenses to bare minimum. They've had some tax increases this year, some mandates placed on them by our legislature and our governor that have been costly. And now they're being saddled with a $1 increase in the minimum wage, which is about a 10% increase for the workers who are making that wage. So it's a very inopportune time to have that kind of increase because the companies have no room to absorb that. The options of companies to pay for that increase are few and far between, and they're all pretty ugly. They can lay off workers, they can reduce hours, they can cut benefits, they can raise the cost of their product if that's possible, if they're even selling anything right now. So this is a very difficult situation for us. That's why when this legislation was first introduced, we lobbied very heavily for what we called the economic off-ramp to allow for the legislature or the governor in difficult times to suspend the increase in the minimum wage to give the business community some breathing room. This would have been the absolute perfect opportunity to have that implemented, but it is not part of the law, and therefore it is not being implemented, and companies are being saddled with this $1 increase.
No, Tom, I mean, if that's the case, what's the expectation? Because you look at how many businesses in New Jersey that aren't open relative to what they were in January. According to Harvard University, we're seeing a drop off there of about a third. So It seems like that number would be expected to go up if you're dealing with the hardships you're discussing there. So, I mean, what are the expectations?
There could be more businesses closing because of this. Time will tell. It sure won't improve that probability. And the problem is we do have about 30% of the small businesses in the state of New Jersey having either closed or about to close. The restaurant industry is even harder hit than that. And there are significant numbers of minimum wage people employed in the hospitality restaurant industry. So the chances of having more companies go out will probably be enhanced by this minimum wage increase. I have to say, though, that on the other side of the equation, when this legislation was first proposed, we as the Chamber of Commerce were all in favor of having a minimum wage increase, as long as it was digestible and absorbable by the business community in any given year, and with some predictability, which the bill provided. But the economic off-ramp gave us the ability to mute that if needed. So that was what was missing from this. That is what is needed right now. But again, it's the one thing that we lobbied for very hard that was not part of the legislation, and we're paying the price for that right now.
And Tom, you've talked about the challenges to small businesses especially, but the flip side to that is, of course, this pandemic has exposed the risks that essential workers are taking at a very low pay. We saw early on in the pandemic, number of workers did not want to return to work. Number one, because they didn't feel safe enough, but also number two, because they weren't getting paid enough. That those additional unemployment benefits paid much more than they would have been paid if they actually showed up to work. I mean, what do you say to that argument? And ultimately, that if you have the higher wages, that leads to less turnover and essentially helps out businesses with their payroll costs because it costs much more to try and hire new employees on board.
It's a good point, and I can tell you that in the first go around of the stimulus package, the first stimulus package that came, there was a $600 per week supplement to the people unemployed, and that plus their state benefits paid a lot of these people more than they were making if they were working. So it caused a problem from the standpoint of getting people to come back to work. Now that's been cut from 600 to 300. It's still going to be a close call, I think. But at the end of the day, I think people who are working would prefer to work in most cases. They are counting on this dollar increase, and they will get it. So it's really a situation of bad options right now. And again, if there had been the off-ramp vehicle in place, maybe the debate could happen to find a compromise, but that is not possible right now. So the combination of businesses being impacted, people getting paid more than they were if they were working, the businesses being saddled with an increase, all these are very bad options for business right now. And we're just hoping that we get through this fairly soon and we can get back to a position where it's more normal.
Well, Tom, I mean, on the plus side, New Jersey is in an interesting position considering the progress on the cannabis front there. It's something that, a lot of people were expecting or at least hoping to see come through in 2019. You got it through the ballot initiative in 2020, but now it's a question of when you'll start to see the sales come through, when those licenses and the whole system set up. But as the New Jersey Chamber of Commerce president and CEO, talk to me about what your expectations are, how big of a boost that's going to be for the state of New Jersey in these tough times, and when you expect to start to see money coming through.
Well, it hasn't been signed yet. The governor had an issue with the final package presented to him, and they're adjudicating between the governor's office and the legislature a compromise right now, and hopefully it'll get signed. We're hearing it could be signed this week or next week for it to be implemented. But that industry that needs to be set up. There's got to be regulations. There's got to be a bureaucracy set up. There's got to be people chosen to be the vendors of this and the growers of this. There's a whole lot of infrastructure that needs to be built before this becomes a real industry. So for the immediate term and probably for this fiscal year, there's probably not going to be much financial impact to the state of New Jersey. Going forward, there will be. It's not enormous compared to the GDP or the budget of New Jersey, but it's an industry that will help. It will employ people. It will create sales and taxes. So it'll be a plus, but this is not something that's going to cure the overall financial problems of our state.
All right, Tom Bracken, New Jersey Chamber of Commerce President and CEO. Appreciate you joining us on that, and good luck out there with everything.